A young mother forced to carry a baby while brain dead on life support has been laid to rest. Today, family and friends of Adriana Smith gathered for her funeral at Fairfield Baptist Church in Lithonia. People prayed and shared stories about the 30-year-old mother and nurse who was declared brain dead in February after suffering from medical complications. At the time, she was 8 weeks pregnant. Her family told Atlanta News First that doctors kept Smith on life support in accordance with Georgia's Life Act, a restrictive abortion law that bans the procedure after 6 weeks. State Rep Park Cannon attended Smith's funeral today, presenting a resolution to protect medical rights during pregnancy.
Whereas we believe bodily autonomy should be upheld in Georgia by enacting Adriana's law. Again, Adriana's law, which would affirm that individuals retain agency over their bodies and medical decisions, even under restrictive fetal personhood regimes.
Americans have the
Now, while Smith was in the hospital, Georgia Attorney General Chris Carr said there was nothing in that law that required doctors to keep a woman on life support after brain death, saying that removing life support is not an action with the purpose of terminating a pregnancy. Georgia's Life Act allows exceptions in cases of rape, incest, or if the life of the mother is at stake. Smith doesn't necessarily fit into any of those categories, which has sparked a lot of debate and discussion about this law.